Mr. Johnson always had the finest snowmen on the block. These weren't your run-of-the-mill 3 circles piled on top of each other snowmen. There were plenty of those, but there were so much more that are better described as full-on snow sculptures. Dragons soaring out of the white to bite at the sun, maidens dancing with pitchers of snow gushing onto the lawn, even an entire snow village of your traditional snowmen, complete with a post office, school, and tiny snow children. Each person had their own unique colon-carrot-built expression, down to what we called Humpty Grumpty, due to the sour expression of one snowman, looking withered and angry as he stared at the passers-by from his snow fort wall. Every winter, we looked forward to Mr. Johnson's snow menagerie. It was a fun way to bring in the new year. Mr. Johnson always waited a few snowfalls to make sure that we were well into the dead of winter, when his creations would be safe from melting, until the cold season finally ended mid-March. Naturally, it wasn't built overnight, but for those dreary winter months, at least every month, and sometimes every week, another sculpture would join the horde overnight, until the end of February, where they would wait for the first sign of above freezing temperatures, and then swiftly disappear. No one was sure why Mr. Johnson would remove his sculptures instead of letting them just melt away, but he always did. And no one really questioned him on it because we didn't want to ruin the magic. At least, until last year. Last year, Mr. Johnson died. It was one of those come-out-of-nowhere heart attacks. His fellow churchgoers had noticed that he hadn't been in for a few weeks, so they stopped by to check on him. He had died with the heat off, apparently, because the house was cold once they got the police to break down the door after a welfare check call. He was found peacefully in his recliner, smelling a bit, but not nearly as bad as it would have been had the heat been blasting. The whole town turned out for his funeral, and without a next of kin, his estate went into state control. The debate of what to do with Mr. Johnson's snowmen came up soon after the funeral. No one wanted to be responsible for destroying his creations, so we all decided for the poetic finality of watching his sculptures slowly melt back into the ground, just as he had faded from our lives. People talked about the inevitable with a hint of wistful satisfaction. The collective curious to behold the slow disappearance of our winter joy into the embrace of spring, the fading beauty having been denied us year over year prior. It was a warm day when the high school photography class took an impromptu field trip to Mr. Johnson's corner lot. We clambered out of the school bus, each eager for our defining piece, but still respectful enough to keep the snow trampling to a minimum and staying off the yard proper. I was part of that class, and having walked by Mr. Johnson's yard on my way home every day, I felt like I was more connected than my classmates to his winter wonderland, and as such, searched for the perfect spot, the ideal angle to immortalize this part of my childhood, now forever lost. I trudged along the edge of the yard, boots slipping in the slush and mud, angling my camera this way and that to find the right picture. The snow angel? Nah, too cliche. 3-headed dragon with lower jaws melted away? Cool, but more Dungeons and Dragons nerd cool. My teenage brain considered for a second photographing the maiden with her toga melted away from her chest, now a flat expanse of blue-tinged snow, and calling it Innocence Lost. But I pushed that away as being weird, bordering on creepy. I rounded the part of a yard that bordered the snow village, and there my image was. The snow child, staring up at Humpty Grumpty. The little tot's charcoal expression still evident despite the melting away of his chin and hair details. He reached a single tiny stick arm towards Humpty Grumpty, who had been sculpted to scowl down at him. But with the higher elevation meaning more sunlight, his expression had turned softer, almost sad. I hunched down and shuffled until I got the right starting angle, capturing both the boy and the harried, wall-mounted man, moving slowly around to get as much of the scene as possible. Click, 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 click. Standing upright, I grinned as I reviewed the photos on my Nikon screen. The shadows perfect, the glisten just right off the melting snow. Then I screamed. "What? What's happened?" Mrs. Lanier, the photography teacher, came rushing up to me. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" My mouth worked, but I couldn't get anything out. I pointed at my Nikon, at my picture. The picture of the little snowboy. The little snowboy with the melted, south-facing side, revealing a real little hand. Police came again, then vans. Many, many vans. Some vans had to leave and come right back. A shuttle service for the dead. In the end, they counted 47 bodies. 47 bodies for 47 snow sculptures. Even the snow post office walls were built up with bodies. They ranged from 4 years old to 70. Humpty Grumpty, built from an old man who was forever frozen in a gnarled, hunched sitting position. Many missing person cases were solved that day. It was an easy thing for the police to do. All the bodies had been frozen since the moment of death, so a simple scan of missing person photos helped tie up loose ends all across the country. The DNA evidence backed it up. Mr. Johnson, old, sweet Mr. Johnson, whose garden of snow sculptures grew year after year, wasn't doing so out of the goodness of his heart to bring happiness to the neighborhood. He was doing it so each year he could hide his trophies in plain sight. To laugh quietly at all the naive little townspeople oohing and ahhing over his kills. For a lot of families, years of questions were answered that day. For our town, years of questions were just beginning. Hey, thanks for listening, and a special thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon for supporting me. If you're new to the channel, maybe click the